So we're gonna get started. Thank you for joining us today in our first Do No Harm, offering harm reduction and compassionate care for those struggling with substance abuse. I'm really excited to hear what our presenters have to say. So we have today the pleasure, I have the pleasure to introduce Justin Beatty and Gina Fears from Mental Health America of Indiana. Their full bios are available on Eventbrite, and the PowerPoint presentation will be made available to you all on the IHCDA website after this conference. And this session is being recorded, so the recording will also be available. And without further delay, please help me welcome our presenters by giving them a round of applause.
Good afternoon. How are you all?
Wonderful.
I'm Gina Fears. I am not Justin. However, Justin is much more famous in these parts. He's been up and down the state, but I'm Gina Fears, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today and to have this be able to have this conversation. So I was invited because of some work that I was able to do with some friends in the Chicagoland area. And they actually made connection with someone here and said, oh, call Gina and ask her to come up. And so I do the same type of thing because resources are an amazing thing for us to have, and we need to keep those close to us in our pocket. So I did the same thing with Justin. Hey, Justin, we're going to do this. And he came with me. And so thank you, Justin. He is real good support. And I am the new Peer Innovation Manager for Mental Health America. I'm about a month into that job. However, I have been working with Mental Health America as a contractor, training peers for their state certification and to be able to carry that job probably for about 13 years now. And Justin, I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself. Do you want to do that now?
Sure.
Okay.
So hi, everybody. I'm Justin Beatty. My pronouns are he and him. I'm in a leadership position with Mental Health America of Indiana. And so I kind of oversee everything in credentialing related under that. And more specific to probably what you all would be interested in is I provide leadership to an organization called NR, which stands for the Indiana Alliance of Recovery Residences. We're a statewide organization to ensure safe and stable housing for anybody seeking or in recovery from substance use. So like you may have heard the term, and the first couple I'm going to say, like, don't ever use them again if you use them. I'm not shaming you, but I'm educating you. You may have heard of halfway houses, don't ever use it. Flop houses, don't ever use it. You know, and things like that. They're recovery residences. They're a residence, you know, I encourage you not even use the word house. Like a residence has an elegance to it. You know, and as when you're thinking about people that have been previous traumatized and stuff like that, we want to give them every empowering thing we can. So that's why it's in our title. But what we do is we ensure through governance, oversight, support, and training and things like that, that anybody seeking or in recovery has a safe and stable place to lay their head at night. That is free from minimizing traumas, free from anything. I mean, similar to what you all do for people that have different experiences. We just kind of have a niche around people either seeking or in recovery from substance use. And like I said, we're a third-party agency to ensure everybody's legit and like actually doing what they're supposed to. And so I'm gonna hand it back off to her and I will talk to you here in a little bit.
And so that really leads us into the topic that we want to be in discussion with you about today. So we don't necessarily want to come and just be giving you a lot of information. We literally want to have a discussion with you today, and we'd like for it to be that type of forum for the next 50 minutes or so. That truly, there's not a question and answer time at the end, but as we are talking that we do have this conversation, we want to talk about harm reduction. And what does that look like for us? The topic that was actually chosen for us, and I do think it was chosen for us, is first do no harm, which is always the first thing that we want to be conscious of, is that we cause no harm to an individual that has been harmed in so many different ways, whether it is self-imposed or whether it has happened in the environment that they've been a part of. So we first step out in everything that we do to do no harm, whether that is in our language, as Justin just pointed out some things for us. We don't cause any more harm in our language. So anytime that we are working to not cause harm, we are in turn also reducing harm and therefore harm reduction. And so I think a lot of times when we start out with harm reduction, we're thinking of something more times than not, the pull-up needle exchange. That's one of the first things that comes to our mind, but we need to expand our minds around harm reduction. And so I'm going to go a little bit further into this title, offering harm reduction and compassionate care for those who are struggling with substance abuse. Not everyone that comes across our path is actually struggling with substance abuse. Some of them have made conscious choices to use.
And some may even say to you, they're not abusing the substances, they're using them exactly how they want to. I mean, that's really where it's important to look at the way words matter and stuff like that, because you even see terms like substance misuse. I mean, you talk to somebody, like, somebody is using heroin exactly how they plan to use it and what the point of heroin is. That substance is not being misused at all. Heroin was created to get you high. So if you're going to use heroin, you're using it to get high. So there's not even misuse of that substance. I'm using it exactly, for lack of better wording, how myself or my dealer has prescribed it to me.
And if we were doing some pre-test, we might ask you questions like, do you think that harm reduction gives persons permission to use? And I'm not asking you to answer, but when we really think about that and we're truly honest with ourselves, they didn't ask our permission anyway. They never have. In the entire history of time that they have decided that they would ingest substances in whatever that way it is, wet or dry, they've never asked our permission. And so harm reduction, in fact, could not do that. I have another question. Would you consider seatbelts harm reduction?
Yeah.
Would you consider car seats for babies harm reduction? And so harm reduction is not just a simple piece that deals only with substances, but it is a strategy, a spectrum of strategies that help us to reduce harm in our lives, in program lives, in the life of the person that may be using substances, in their community, for their family, and then even communities at large. And so that's how we would like to today begin to have this conversation around harm reduction. And so I guess we'll go with our slide. I can't guarantee you that we'll stay with these. I really can't. It's kind of just not really our way. But again, harm reduction is compassionate care. If we are really caring for people and we are doing this work with compassion, and we call it true service, we will be compassionate in those ways. That, you know, it's not that I'm going to come and tell you that you absolutely must stop using, you must find abstinence today, no matter how hurt and harmful that may be for you, because, you know, that could be harmful as well. But how can I support you in causing less harm to yourself? And again, we want to make this point that not everyone that we perceive is struggling with substances is struggling with substance. And as with substance use, and as we decide to become supports and come alongside of a person and support them, then we need to hear what their perception is. And that is the one that we operate off of, not the one that I have. Go on forward. So here is a definition of harm reduction. It's a pretty healthy definition, so we're going to take it in a few parts. This definition is written and posted on website with the Midwest Harm Reduction Institute. So harm reduction offers a spectrum of strategies for managing alcohol use, drug use, and other risky behaviors. So harm reduction, again, is not just confined and limited to the use of substances. It includes approaches that lead to safer use, causing no harm. Moderation. That doesn't mean that it's complete abstinence, or even abstinence, depending on the individual's desires and needs. Because the focus is on improving the quality of life, not for me, but for that individual. Any step that reduces harm to the individuals, their loved ones, their community, and society are embraced and celebrated. And sometimes we miss that piece in our quest to be offering compassionate harm reduction. we miss the celebration piece. The philosophy of harm reduction promotes and supports the right of people who use substances to engage in other risky behaviors to be treated with dignity and respect. Because a person has made a choice to use substances does not take away their right to be treated with dignity and respect. Their right to exercise self-determination related to use, and their right to a collaborative approach in therapeutic relationships. One of the things that we believe and that we also share as we're training peers with their own personal lived experience to become peer recovery coaches is that we are training them that they have the opportunity to be a longer term support to some therapeutic things that may have already happened for this individual. Some clinical engagements that may have already happened for this individual. So many times we are asking people, and we don't consider the harm that's in that, to participate in a treatment experience, and now time's up, go live your life. And it's not that simple. And so having the opportunity to impact that relationship with those that have a lived experience and have decided to come alongside as supports extends what has been done in the therapeutic relationship. Because someone is walking with them. If it's been a 30-year quest to get here, why would 6 weeks fix that? And so that's just another piece that we can add into the harm reduction relationship. I don't really know where we are right now, Justin, but I don't know what the next slide is.
Well, and
we'll give it a shot.
one thing I'll add to this is that there's been multiple studies around this and stuff like that. When you look at people that provide supportive services, one of the biggest barriers is unrealistic expectations from the service provider related to the change process of another human individual. We think because we removed them at best from an environment for extended periods of time, you have not removed them from that environment altogether, especially in a communal living environment, because they're around the similar culture that they were living either their current or previous lifestyle with. So there's going to be either word traumas, visual traumas, emotional traumas, and that kind of stuff. But we think, oh, because you've engaged with services for 4 weeks, this has changed the past 14 years of behavior. So we either physically, verbally, mentally, or whatever, essentially shape them and say, you are the problem. You have not done, because our services are evidence-based. Our services do this. Have you seen how long we spent on these worksheets? Have you seen our amazing posters on the wall? We spent like $5,000 from a real artist, and this really works, blah, blah, blah. We don't take in the human piece of it. And a lot of times that's where you see this stuff, whether it's harm reduction or anything else. We as the service provider, a lot of times are the biggest barrier because we have unrealistic expectations. And we hear the terms, versions of meet somebody where they're at, do no harm and this kind of stuff. But what we look at the most, that a lot of harm, the biggest form of harm most of the time that happens in a supportive relationship is developmental harm.
Yes.
And most people do not ever look at that. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about here, is because the number one way people learn, every single human, is by doing. That is why you don't just put a video up to teach a kid how to walk. You let them get bruises all over them. You let them fall. You let them get bloody, all kinds of stuff. Well, hopefully they don't get bloody. But let's be real. They can fall and hit the table, and stuff like that. And you're just like, well, you learned not to try to walk that far next time. Let's put something in the middle. But a lot of times we're so empathetic that we don't allow people to do that natural way our brain works of the developmental process.
You're speaking of sort of a same situation where relapse occurrence is part of the process. That's basically where you're going.
One thing I would challenge that is can be. And it's just a small wording, because some people, nope, get it. And here's the realistic thing. When you look at the stages of change, it is, in my opinion, and I really feel science backs this up, it's an absolute fallacy, lie, myth, whatever you want to say, that anybody has changed themselves the first time they try. When you thoroughly understand the stages of change from pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, no. No one just wakes up and is like, I'm gonna change, and bam, hooray, changed everything. No, like it's an ongoing thing. And so that's where some people need to learn this and that, is saying, oh, well, I think I can do this. I think I can do that. Same way as, in supportive living in general, when you're not even thinking about substance use. It's, man, I thought I could go back to the camp. I thought I could have run around with so-and-so. I thought I could do this, and man, that turned out wrong. And what we need to do as supportive services is not scold, not demean in those situations. Ask the same as we would a child or really anyone, what did you learn? What did that teach you? Because I'm hearing from you, you don't think that was a good idea. Because what we do a lot of times is we search for confirmation. I told you. Did you not listen when we told you you had to change people, places, and things? Look what you proved us right with, rather than the way the human brain really learns of, I'm hearing from you, you said it was not the best choice. Help me understand why that is not the best choice. That's where that cognitive dissonance, that's where that cognitive recollection and stuff like that starts to come in and builds that efficacy in a person's brain. So we'll go back to like the return to use. Someone decides, hey, I'm gonna go try to get high again. Then they're like, man, I can't believe I got high again. Well, why? Why can't you believe you got high again? Man, I was doing so good. So you feel this has made you not be in a good place again. Why? And instead of saying, oh, well, Justin told me this, it's, I told myself this. This is what I learned. So when they're put in similar situations in the future, that's when people have started to teach themselves, and even bigger. Several things have shown that when we hear our voice in our brain doesn't really sound like what we really sound like. Like, hopefully most of you realize that. But when we hear things and run things through our brain in our voice, our brain listens to it differently than if we listen to from a perceived authority figure or anything like that. And so that's where we have to look at all those kind of things.
Justin, in that, back to the stages of change, the statement you've made there, that within.
I have Tourette's, I'm just making.
Okay, no problem. No. In the stages, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't out talking to you. In the stages of change, we look at that maintenance stage, and more times than not, we think that that is an ending of things. However, when we talk in this realm, not only is the use or moderation of substances, or even to the point of abstinence, the only change that has to be made, but there are so many other things that have to change. And so in the maintenance stage, actually other changes are occurring in that stage for it to really be maintenance. So it may be that there is a reuse. Now we've got to look at, how do I change what got me to that place of reuse in order for it to really be maintenance? So maintenance stage doesn't mean everything's quit. That's why we say that those stages of change are not linear. They're not just A, B, C, D, now we're done. They may reoccur. It may be a reoccurring, or it may be a completion of another change happening.
One is part of that too. Like, I've always thought this, that like, it really should be pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, action. But it doesn't flow off the tongue. It doesn't read right, because maintenance, if you think about maintenance on your house, maintenance on your car, maintenance on your nails, your hair, whatever it is, it's an ongoing action to keep something where it is. It doesn't say fixed, it doesn't say solved or anything like that. Like, there is action all throughout the maintenance stage, and part of any action is learning, adjusting, and that kind of thing to whatever life experiences come up throughout that.
For lack of better words, tweaking it.
Yes, yeah.
So I think, that one of the things that we have to really come to understand is that if we're going to support someone in this process of harm reduction, which most things in our life are process anyway, that we can't be trying to get to the finish line that we have decided should be long before they've even decided that that is their finish line. And so therefore, it's respecting that spectrum of strategies, respecting if it's moderation. And so what are the principles of harm reduction? I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be you, but I just kept talking, didn't I? A person's decision to use is accepted, and we respect it.
And that's the key word there is respect it.
Mhm.
Like, not just that you accept it, that you actually respect that person's autonomy. Because the other thing we see in helping professions, like, in case you haven't ever had anybody tell you this directly, you don't have to do a single effing thing anybody you provide services to does in their life. But so many of you act like because somebody is doing it, that you have to go home and do that. That it just offends you to your core that somebody would do this or that. And you know what it comes down to a lot of times? Ego. Do you understand what we are doing for you? And you're gonna do this. Like, for real, you got a lot of work to do. Like, in any kind of supportive services, you gotta be, to be successful in this, and I rarely say you have to be anything, and like talking absolutes, like that's why Gina's laughing, like I absolutely hate absolutes. So there's very few things I'll talk in, like, you gotta understand, none of this has anything to do with you.
What about you?
Your job will be so much easier when you realize none of this has to do with you, and if nothing else, be a little happy that you get to go home to whatever your other life is. Like, it's okay to be a little happy on that drive home and be like, whoo, glad I ain't gotta live there. Glad I ain't gotta deal with that all day. And honestly, that mentality will help you because you don't internalize the choices other people are making in their lives. And it really helps you be more there for that person in the moment because you recognize them as an individual and their autonomy. And most importantly, you recognize and respect them as a human to do whatever they wish. Because here's the thing, and this is going to be a little morbid, morose, but follow for a second. Somebody just died. Somebody got high. Somebody was born. Probably 2 people died together right there. Like 6 people got high right there. And what I'm pointing out is stuff happens all over the world, everywhere, all the time, regardless of what you do. The way you're going to positively affect situations is create an environment where someone can come talk to you. That regardless of what's going on in their life, they say, I can go speak open and honestly with this organization, this person, or whatever, and have 0 fears of being judged. That's what true respect of another human is. And them respecting you is that they know regardless of what happened, as good and different or bad as it is, I can come talk to you and have an open, honest conversation and not be scared of repercussions.
And on that same thing, for those that come to do this work with a lived experience of their own, sometimes we are way too caught up in that to be able to have a level of acceptance on this person is not me. This person will not do this the way that I did it. This person does not want to do it the way that I did it, and allowing that individual. And so then that says that there's definitely some work for that individual to do in their own personal recovery, because that is taking a God stance in someone's life and trying to operate that. You know, on your piece of being able to go home at night, for the person that does identify as having their own lived experience, to be able to lead that each evening should be a point of gratitude. And so being able to go back to what is the gift of that person's own recovery and not be so caught up in they didn't do what I thought they should do. We want to make sure that the person is treated with dignity. They're not less than, that we don't stigmatize, that we don't place labels on individuals because they have made choices to use. The person is expected to take responsibility for their behavior. We are not fixers. Even in supportive housing settings, there are no fixers. We are not fixers of people. And so knowing that whatever goals that that individual sets out to accomplish, wherever they say that they want to be on that recovery journey of their own, that they are responsible for getting there. We are responsible for supporting. Persons have a voice. They get to make choices. They get to say where they want to be. They get to say where they don't want to be. And that reducing harm is not necessarily just focused on consumption. That it may be focused on how the use happens and that it is no longer harmful. In housing communities, it may be focused on how that use happens so that the community is safer when that one is using. So agree to find outcomes and then forming our own coalitions. And Justin, you want to talk about the modified form of coalitions?
Yeah, so when you look at that, like, really, so there's like true harm reduction coalitions, there's every version in between. You know, there's generally, don't ever use the word needle exchange. Like, I'm gonna say that right off the bat, but most of you will identify low barrier services, or some people may recognize them as syringe service providers, SSPs, you know, or most people recognize them as needle exchanges because you probably first heard about them in the news, how these scary needle exchanges are coming in your neighborhood and they're gonna get all the kids hooked on drugs. They're gonna go get high in the school zone, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so it's important to recognize, though, that any organization can become a harm reduction coalition by one, supporting it, and if you're not providing the supplies to reduce harm, knowing where someone can get it and being open and honest of saying, hey, if you're going to use, we want you to be safe. Here's our community partner that can ensure you have whatever safe supply means for you. And so the reason I say, like, don't ever call them like needle exchanges or any of that kind of stuff, because that at best represents about 10% of the services those organizations do. And that's a high percent. Like, they do so many different types of rapid testing. They do wraparound services. I mean, they can be an amazing, I don't know if any of you have open beds, but they can be an amazing referral source for you, you know, and that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, it's looking at that kind of thing and understanding there's everything there from test strips to, you know, clean works, otherwise known as sharp needles, you know, and stuff like that, to make sure people don't re-injure themselves when they're using, you know. And here's one thing I always say with this is, a lot of times the pushback is, well, my uncle who's diabetic can't get free needles. Oh, he absolutely can. All he has to do is take all his used needles, walk over to that low barrier service and exchange them and get all brand new needles to inject their insulin. They don't test them and say, oh, no, this tests positive for insulin. You can't have a new needle. It's got to test positive for dope, you know, or anything. No, like, it is they exchanged used syringes for new syringes. So if anybody, for any reason, has a used syringe, they can take it to that location and swap out and get new syringes. And these are the kinds of things we don't know because it's so stigmatizing, because we think so negatively about this, you know, and those kind of things. And so that's where, you know, with harm reduction coalitions, you have several different levels. I mean, you have like the for real guerrilla ones, like, I'm not going to mention them by name, but I mean, there's ones like for real out doing the work, like straight doing the work, like helping you test your stuff for you. They'll inject you if necessary to make sure, you know, hang out with you. There's things like Never Use Alone that you can call and someone will stay on the line with you the whole entire time and continue to talk to you. And if you don't talk for a certain amount of time, they will call and have medical services come get you to make sure you don't die. You know, it's like understanding things like all your organizations, if you know people who actively use, you should definitely make sure that they have, you know, naloxone. You should make sure they have access to fentanyl tech strips, xylazine strips, you know, and those kind of things. Because, and the other thing is ensuring they have a friend who will use with them. Because there's a big thing. There's a 0% chance of changing your life if you're dead. Like, that's just a straight 100% scientific data-driven fact. If you are dead, there's no chance of you having any positive change in your life. And so that's where we talk about all these different things. But what we hear most of the time is what I call the cookie cutter harm reduction. Is, oh,
You want to go back?
yeah, go back to the
the
products.
one. Oh, Lord.
You can use the scrolling thing.
Yeah. No, well, okay, so.
One more?
Yeah, so we'll talk about those in a minute. And so when we talk about this, so I jumped ahead a little bit, I apologize.
That's okay. Keep them going.
I
Keep
don't
it
need
going.
your approval, I need theirs. You and I talk about this all the time. So one of the things with this is, like we're talking about, is like, it's amazing that you all showed up here to do this.
Mhm.
Biggest challenge to you is, what are you going to do about what we talk about here? And that means taking this mentality, this conversation back to your organization, ensuring other people that couldn't be here or attended another session learn about the things we're talking about today, because you want it integrated into everything your organization does. from paid staff, volunteers, whoever. So regardless of who speaks with who, they know it's a safe, supportive atmosphere where they can talk about anything. Because a lot of times we only train, say like this person, and a lot of times we look at us, who needs continuing education units? Oh, you don't need continuing education units because you don't have a license or credential? Oh, then you don't need any training. Absolutely not. Everybody needs training. Here's one of the things too. So by a show of hands, how many of you have like a front desk person or whatever that maybe checks people in or something like that? Okay, so like a decent portion of you. And if you don't technically have that title, you probably have somebody that's like your welcomer, like first person that talks to people, whatever it is, whether on the phone or whoever, use whatever title you want. That should be the most educated, well-trained person in your whole entire team. Absolutely. That is the real face of your organization. I'm not talking about the face of your marketing, not who's out there getting them dollars, politicking, kissing the babies, you know, all that kind of stuff, sitting at the tables. That is the person who should be the most educated. And historically, that is the most overlooked person in your organization from pay, support, time off, and everything. And they're the person that's going to deal with every person, not just enrolled or staying at your place, every person who's ever thought about engaging with your organization has called or talked or visited with that person. It starts with that thing. When you look at studies from the medical profession or anything, the #1 satisfaction rating for people that return for services is the way the front desk team treated them. That is that there's all over pretty much any type of profession that has front desk people. So consider that. But like I said, a lot of times they're heavily overlooked because, oh, they're just. So one thing I'll tell you around harm reduction as well is harm reduction to our feelings.
Yeah.
When you're talking to anybody, try not to ever use the word just, because it's demeaning and it's less than. I can do better at that. There's times I do it as well. We're human. It's a word that's used all the time, but always remember that. But really, and then the other piece of this is when you get this education and stuff like that, get it from legitimate places. Like there's all kinds of amazing places, like shameless self-promotion. You can always come to the MHAI Training Institute. That's one of the other organizations we represent. We do all types of training on mental health, substance use, advocacy, and stuff like that. If you're looking for stuff around harm reduction, there's the one out of Chicago Gina mentioned. There's Overdose Lifeline. There's the Chicago Harm Reduction Alliance. There's so many amazing ones out there that really teach you all types of different things around this. But it's important to understand that this field is constantly changing. So don't think because, oh, in 2019, I sat through this thing, or like now you're like, well, I went to this conference and this dude and this chick like got up there and I'm really sure they knew what they were doing. Like it was kind of odd. I've never seen a presentation like that. But it had harm reduction in the title, so I'm good. Like I know everything about harm reduction for the rest of my life. I'm gonna tell everybody, no, like this stuff changes constantly. And like what I'll use as an example, and it's, we talks about the products in a little bit, but I'll talk about it right now as an example is, so 2015, the reason the opioid epidemic became so popular in Indiana is because a county called Scott County had the highest per capita HIV outbreak in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And so hooray, this small little town, it was actually, Austin was the main, was the epicenter of it. And so Austin is there in Scott County. Most people know Scottsburg. If you drive down 65 South, you probably didn't even pay attention to the signs that tell you either. And so it put this huge spotlight on Indiana, because I'm talking about like the BBC from Europe came over, did all kinds of stuff. It was in Time, all kinds of these things. And so then at the time, Governor Pence was like, oh, look at what they made us look like. That's gross.
They put the sign, the flashing sign on the highway on 65 as you rode by
Yeah.
to say, Scott County, don't exit.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad, the stuff that went on there. And so as part of that, that's where you started hearing about the opioid epidemic in Indiana. And so that's where you had the first harm reduction service. That's where the first syringe service program, you know, low barrier threshold service, what happened was through there. So we're still, how many of you are still hearing about the opioid epidemic? Raise your hand. Opioid epidemic hasn't been around for several years. Opioids are not our problem. Fentanyl was our problem. Fentanyl is not our problem anymore. Xylazine is now our problem because scientists are really smart. When people start catching on to stuff, we're just gonna make something new. So situations morph and change throughout time. So that's why it's important to go to trainings, continue to learn of stuff and things like that, and get this stuff to really make sure your people are safe. You know, because like, for example, like, hooray, it's super awesome to have naloxone. Like, more people know it as Narcan, but that's a trade-specific name. Naloxone is the actual chemical compound. And so as part of that, though, like, if people are, you know, hearts are stopping, they're having near fatal overdoses on things like xylazine, naloxone's not gonna do anything for them. So it's important to recognize, but that doesn't mean don't have it available for somebody because you don't even know what you're getting. You know, this stuff is not labeled by the FDA. And just side little advocacy thing, like, don't trust what the FDA puts on your stuff either. You know, let's just be real. Like, you don't know what you're getting anywhere. You know, it's not like there's some organization that's like, we're gonna govern all non-legal substances and make sure there's this label on there that says, yes, you're buying meth, but 7% of this is actually fentanyl and 2% is actually xylazine. No, it's not at all. But over the course of time, over the past couple of years, they have pretty much studied every substance you can inject into your body or snort or take. None of it is what it says it is. It may have components of it in there, you know, and that kind of stuff. So that's where it's important to recognize all these things as part of it. But as part of that also, you'll see, like I said, we hear a lot about naloxone, Narcan, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But there's also, you know, the true kits where we start providing people the clean things they need, making sure they have a clean cotton ball to be able to use stuff, making sure they have different things. And we're not expecting you to like make these kits. That's not what we're here to advocate at all. What we're saying is have the partners, because just going back to what Gina said, people who are going to use substances are going to use substances. Like, just plain and simple. And there's 0% chance of them wanting positive change in their life or starting to enact it if they're dead. Just plain and simple. And so that's where we do this. Yeah, what's up?
Okay, so, going back, what is xylazine?
Xylazine is it's kind of like a real high version of like fentanyl. It's just another man-made substance for people to get high off of it.
And people that use it, they have a high percentage of overdosing then possible.
Yeah, even more.
Even more.
Yeah. Yeah, like,
Narcan doesn't touch it.
no.
So it is some medication that's actually from a vet, or something, or is it the stuff that's?
It can be.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's very, see, and the thing is that's where I said scientists are pretty crafty. Yeah, scientists are pretty crafty because, like, the other thing is that's the general name given to it. That doesn't mean that's what people are getting. You know, same kind of thing. That's where it's just the easiest kind of thing around it. But really the reality is this is for a lot of people is for someone whose brain is not made up or works a certain way, we hear, oh my gosh, someone almost died. Stay away from there. For other people's brains that work a certain way is, I'll just take a little less. But I definitely have to go over there and get that.
And I
Yeah.
think
I
what,
had a
Oh, hold on a second.
I was just gonna say, I think what you heard was about a horse tranquilizer, that is true. What Justin is saying is that this xylazine, we don't know what's in it, but that's the closest name.
Yeah,
recognition for it.
that's essentially what the street name is, but a lot of the street names are catches. Cause like, for example, a lot of fentanyl is actually carfentanil, you know, and that kind of stuff. It's kind of like how, and what I'll use as an example is like a lot of people are like, hey, give me a beer. And they'll drink a Coors, they'll drink a Bud, they'll drink a Michelob. They're not too, but it's just kind of a more catch-all type name where it's the same general type substance, but the chemical compound makeup of it could be different.
I've heard many clients tell me that the way drug dealers will sell something is they'll say, you know the stuff that killed Jimmy? This is it. And people will just jump right on it. And I'm like,
that kind of talk's getting me out of the room, because I'm like, it killed somebody? No, that's a no for me. But they jump on it because it's exciting to them, because it means it's good.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
That's a little scary.
Well, and that's where I mentioned, like, if your brain works a certain
that
way, your reaction is one way. But if your brain works another way, you react in an opposite way.
Well, and at this point, they're just fiending, and to them, that's obviously good,
Yeah.
and so they're going for it. And they probably have reason to not want to live at this point too, so they're like, well, who cares?
Well, that, I would be careful making that assumption that they don't want to live because they're using substances.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that they've found more worth in using than they have in living at this point. So for them, they're like, that high is worth it to me. 'Cause
Well,
I've
for some
literally
people, that
Narcan
is
people-
living.
And well, they came and told me that I owe them money because I've Narcan them because, and I'm like, you were literally dying. Like you were on your way to meet your maker. So, and they're like, no, I was high. You've ruined my high. You owe me. And they'll tell me how much money I owe. I'm like, what? I don't know.
And I want to back Justin up on that, being very careful that a person doesn't want to live. They may want to escape the reality, but
And
that's
that's
not
what I
saying
meant by
that
that. I
they
didn't
don't
mean
want
that,
to
but like,
live.
that's what I meant by that. I'm sorry.
They don't want to live in that moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
Like
so
whatever
they're
that
escaping
environment
reality. So
is.
for them,
Yes.
the escape of reality
Yeah.
is worth it because they don't really consider, life even at this point worth living in most days. Like that's what I've seen from them. Like a lot of them tell me that they don't feel loved, they don't feel supported, they don't feel like anyone would care if they were gone tomorrow. So for them, what's the risk?
And what
You know
an
what I mean?
amazing intervention place for us to provide that compassionate support.
Yep.
Even where that's murky and muddy and it's not pretty and it's nasty, what a wonderful place to be to provide that support and ongoing support, and even some of those points of intervention, some of those products that could be solutions, and to stick and stay with that individual on a regular basis. And it may take time, because even time takes time for them to feel differently on this day, but someone has been there offering that compassionate care.
Well, and a piece of it is too, is recognizing that for someone who's generally in what's considered chaotic use, they're using and negative situations are happening on a regular time interval. That is their reality.
That is.
Like, it's not like, when they're not under the influence is when they're escaping their reality. So they are going back to what is their reality of being under the influence, because that's the way they've lived their lifestyle for so long. But for a lot of people, again, that's brains don't work or think a certain way, we look at it as the opposite way. Say someone that doesn't have substance use issues, you more look at, say, using a substance as a relaxer. That it's maybe something I do once every couple months when I hang out with these people at a cookout, blah, 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 whatever it may be, like that kind of thing. Well, the other stuff is, for other people, it's the exact opposite. This is how I function all day, every day. I don't like this 30-minute interval where I'm between
Well,
the down and the
when I
up.
was young, like 20-some years ago, and I would be accused of using when I was sober. And I'd be like, this is me naturally. So this, obviously you don't like the real me because this is not me high. So I understand that. Like I do understand where they come from, because I have faced addiction myself. But like I said, it was 20+ years ago. And luckily for me, I think that even then, if you would have said it was death, I would have ran. So my brain never went there, thank God, because that's very scary to me, that someone would still fiend for something knowing that it killed their best friend yesterday. That's so scary. And it makes me wonder, how do you get so far there? It's just awful and it's sad. And I do process those moments with them, obviously, and I feel really good about the fact that they trust me enough to come and say things like that to me without feeling like I'm gonna judge them for saying it. I just don't know how to wrap my mind around it sometimes, because it breaks my heart to know that they're okay with that. Like that risk is worth it.
Absolutely.
And what you're bringing up kind of leads us to the next thing, is like, I don't know what any of your professional backgrounds, personal experiences, professional experiences, education, career has taken you or whatever. Us talking about this is not trying to put a responsibility on you to deal with all this. If you've heard us talk several times, and both of us mentioned several times, is nowhere, fill in the blank. That is what we're trying to advocate for, is knowing where are the supportive services and stuff like that. Whether it's maybe getting some funding to hire someone like a peer recovery coach to come in and be available for people, partnering with your local recovery center, partnering with your local RCO. And RCO stands for Recovery Community Organization. And what that is, it's a freestanding organization that is recovery-based, that just provides recovery services, help people navigate systems, get resources, provided supports. They're either volunteer or paid staff that all have personal lived experience with substance use, mental health, or co-occurring situations. And so that way that, someone can be connected to someone, a safe, supportive environment that can talk to them, support them in those kind of things. And there's 19 of them all over the state. Like there is an RCO to cover every 92 counties in the state of Indiana. So I encourage you to go to a website called Indiana Recovery Network and look up the Regional Recovery Hub program. And there's an interactive map. You can click on your county and it'll give you the contact information of the local RCO, and they provide free services. So partner with your local RCO and be like, hey, we're going to have somebody that needs y'all, and you're going to have someone that needs us. How do we become friends? And, and do that kind of stuff. And really, that's the idea of this, is ensuring those safe, supportive services where there's someone to walk alongside that person. Because you all have a lot, I think it's a safe assumption. Is there anybody here that just does not have enough to do in their professional life? Like, please raise your hand. Like, see, like, she's like, no, like, I think he's gonna ask me to do something, so let me put my hand down. But no, it's really that idea that like, we all have more than enough to do. So with this, we're advocating for a mentality and how to partner with the people whose role and job it is to do the specifics around this. And having that available, because one of the things we don't want to happen is we create and have a safe, supportive environment, and then that OS moment happens because someone actually comes to us, and then we're like, oh no, I didn't really think this was going to happen. Like, let me get back to you. And then what do? Like, if any of you use Bing still, don't use Bing, the search engine. It's terrible. Like Microsoft will auto-load it on your stuff. You more than likely go to Google and you just type in something. So I'm going to teach you a random thing. Google is all based on money and algorithms to pop up whoever paid the most money to come up first. It is not based on who's the best service. So you're referring someone you say you have empathy, compassion, and care about to what is most convenient and easiest for you to get them out of your situation. Now, a lot of you are like, no, that's not true at all. Subconsciously it is. And actually it becomes conscious because I just told you. So now you can't pretend like you didn't know that. Like you should have the partners available to where someone comes up and says, hey, and we know you all have rules, regulations, stuff like that. Some of you may have zero tolerance, may have, no use here and that. So you got to have that awkward conversation and be like, yo, for real, it's obvious. Like, for real, let's go talk. And then what is it when you have that conversation and the person's like, yep, high as a kite right now. And you're just like, okay, I get off at 3 o'clock. It's 2:53. I'm just going to sit here and say, and flip through these pages for 7 more minutes. And then Gina comes on at 3. Gina, it's your job. Like, dude's high as could be. So there you go. No, like that's where you have those partners to be like, hey, would you be interested in talking to somebody about this? Because due to our policy and procedure, this is not allowed. Because hopefully all of you have went through policy and procedure with your people. Another thing I encourage is have ongoing conversations about your policy and procedure and not expect someone to remember it when they're at one of the lowest points in their life, when they're engaging with your services. They're traumatized getting in there or whatever, and you've thrown a 50-page manual. Read all this, sign here, here, and here if you do that, and there you go, take it back to your bunk and pull your bunk. Be there, have that supportive services, and be like, hey, like if you use the local RCO, say, hey, we're partnered with this place called an RCO. It's a recovery community organization. It has people who've lived through a bunch of different experiences in their life that will just meet with you and talk to you and see how they can help you with what you need. Is that something you'd be interested in? That's the extent of what we're talking about. And then you have a partnership, whether it's, and we're not always saying I encourage RCOs. And the reason I encourage RCOs is because almost all of them are free. If you're gonna refer someone to your local community mental health center, your local place, you know, or this and that, a lot of times they have to have insurance. And it's pretty safe assumption a good portion of the communities you serve do not have insurance, or if they do, they cannot afford the copay. You know, and that kind of stuff, or have previous trauma related using their insurance. They're like, nah, last time I owed like $500. You know, and so that's where we really promote the RCOs for recovery services and harm reduction based services and things like that, because they're free of charge. They receive multiple grants from state and federal agencies to remove that barrier for everyone. And so as part of that,
And just speak back to that idea of coalitions, that is one of the ways to create our own creative coalition, is to make sure that we have relationships as partners with these different organizations, whether it be the treatment center, the community mental health center, the RCO, one of the recovery hub sites, you know, whether, is there even in our network, is there a dentist that is recovery friendly? How do we really have those relationships? Do we have the opportunity in our housing programs to bring some of those in sometimes and share information with the residents and the occupants of the program, so that it's not always new to them as well, but really having pick up the phone, I'm able to call you kind of relationship. So even if I do have to make the phone call, what do you suggest that I do in this moment if there's that emergency? Or, hey, can you get over? And that's not unusual for them. And so I just wanted to go back to that idea of building our own coalitions, our own partners that then become the ones that know about this particular community, because all of the communities become a culture in themselves as well. And so we want people that understand the culture that they're stepping into as well. So there's that. And Justin, we're pushing on time and we're just sliding all over the place.
and so, and trust me, we've covered everything. So as part of that too is, from personal experience, professional experience, like I've built a lot of programs, I've been involved in a lot of programs throughout the state of Indiana and across the country. And and that's not a humble brag, that is getting to where I'm about to go here. It's getting to where I'm going here. It is a proven, and again, I use the words facts and stuff like that, because everything's subjective to the person and experience. But it is a fact, when you create an open, honest culture where people can talk open and honestly about this, like, it will become normalized very quick through the people you serve, but also your team members. And you will see success rates raise exponentially, because it's happening far more. It's like wherever you work, it's happening right now. Like, you remember how I did that? Like, oh, somebody died, a baby was born, blah, blah, blah. Somebody's either under the influence or getting high right now at one of your facilities. And if it's not at your facility, they stepped away to do it. Like, it's just a fact. So I mean, like, please don't be naive and be like, oh, not us, blah, blah, blah. And they're bringing it back. Like, just being honest, they're bringing it back. Like,
It's in there.
they like y'all, don't get me wrong.
And it's Friday too.
But yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't have a gatekeeper where I work, so
Yeah.
like, it's an outside, like, it's hardest to house, and we have 6 standalone units outside. So just imagine, like, I have no one frisking people to know what's coming in, and then how do you control that?
Well, and I don't want to make you scared, but like, frisking does nothing.
Well, it was
Frisking
nice.
someone and patting someone down does absolutely
Just
nothing.
shake them down and leave.
No, but I'm just saying, like, that's an illusion for the organization to make them feel better.
Right.
And then they're like, well, how did they get it in? Blah, blah, I don't understand, because here's the thing, like, yeah, exactly. They use their intimate pocket to bring it in sometimes. And so as part of that, like, if I just spent some good money on some stuff, I ain't leaving it in that bush down at the corner. No, like, I'm gonna make sure I take it with me, whatever it is. And so, like, the more you create that atmosphere where you can talk open and honestly about this, we're going back to the stages of change, where someone gets that thought in their head, they know, hey, I can go over and talk to so-and-so. Let me go over here and talk. Like, I don't know what to do. I just know I don't want to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And that's where you having those resources really opens it up.
Yeah.
I give them actual access to me at all times, like, they can text or call me if they absolutely need to, just to have that supportive piece when they need it. Because I feel like a lot of times you're right at that precipice of using, all it takes is that good conversation with someone that reminds you that you're worthy, that you're loved. You know, there's other options you can take right now, and this isn't the one, because obviously you're calling me, so you don't want to. And I can talk them off that ledge in that moment, and I always tell them, do that first. You know, don't ever feel like you're bothering me in my daily life. I would much rather hear from you after hours than hear something awful about you tomorrow when I get here, or just whatever that might look like, you know, so, I just try to be as supportive as possible when you're going through it.
So I got one more thing to say, and then we're gonna open it up in these last couple of minutes for any thoughts and.
Squeezing those minutes.
And so, a lot of times you hear, well, I don't believe in harm reduction. Well, first, it's not a ghost.
Yeah.
It's not a myth, like it's real. So there's a difference between saying a lot of people don't understand the difference between I don't agree with and I don't believe. It makes them feel better to say I don't believe in it, like it's not a magic fairy, like it's real, it exists. And the other thing is I really challenge you, if someone tells you they don't believe in harm reduction, tell them to never use a Band-Aid again.
Okay.
A Band-Aid is the most simple form of harm reduction every person has used in their life. Because you put that Band-Aid on you to minimize the blood, to minimize infection and all other things. So that is the thing I would use if you feel like saying something to somebody that says something about something, then don't ever use a Band-Aid. And they're like, wait, what? Why would I use a Band-Aid? Well, why do you use a Band-Aid? Well, I don't want blood to get everywhere. I don't want to get infected. So you're putting something on something to minimize the chance of negative situations happening. Well, yeah. So how's it any different than that? But the biggest thing we can provide to someone who actively uses substances to put on them is love, compassion, and caring. That is the Band-Aid we can use to support people. So does anybody have any additional things you want to ask, anything like that? Or do you really just want like 4 extra minutes of break?
In building this coalition, we run a low barrier shelter, started during COVID. We're like trying to get community providers in to connect with it. Do you have any recommendations? Like, is this Indiana Recovery Network the best place to start? Or is there other
So
resources?
specific to substance use and mental health, yes. The other thing, so where are you at?
South Bend, Indiana.
Okay.
Northern Indiana.
Yeah, so I mean, in South Bend, like, so your local RCO there, and this where it gets kind of muddy waters, is actually Oak Lawn.
Okay.
And so like Oak Lawn has a whole entire recovery-based thing. You have the upper room there. They just opened a recovery cafe. So there's 3 recovery-based ones right there, but I don't know the name of it. But South Bend also has, St. Joe County has a systems of care coordination thing. So I would get involved with St. Joe's systems of care, because that's all types of services, not just substance use or mental health. That's everything for the full thing. So I would encourage getting involved there as well. And that's for anybody. Look for your system of care for the full wraparound.
So you guys are Mental Health America, correct?
Of Indiana,
Of Indiana?
Yeah.
Okay, so where are you located?
Indianapolis, but we provide stuff statewide. And so the
Now, is
reason,
that familiar, is that similar to what Volunteers of America used to be?
no.
No, nothing, okay.
Yeah, no. It sounds similar, but it's different. And the reason I made sure to add the of Indiana is because there's a national organization, Mental Health America, and then there's also county and regional Mental Health America. So there's like Mental Health America of Wabash Valley region, Mental Health America
So
Northwest.
who funds you guys?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, and the reason I say that, not like, ooh, we're so cool, like we just have a lot of diversified funding sources.
That's cool.
Like through different stuff, depending on what we do.
Yeah, it's a huge, I live in Madison County, we have a huge drug problem. I mean, we actually have I teach it's not really substance abuse because I'm in housing, but I teach a group to a bunch of addicts at Mockingbird Hill Park. You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a lot of openings there for people that need some services there, send them our way, told Jeff, send them that way. But I do a group once a month where I teach them. The group I teach is real simple. It's to obtain and maintain employment.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I mean, I don't go in and I ask them 3 questions. I say, where are you from? Because I'm just curious where people are from. What's the best job you ever had and what your hobbies are? One kid said, well, getting high. And I'm like, that's not an option. I mean, when he said that, what you said earlier, I guess the harm reduction, I get what you're saying. So that it was you guys are very good at what you do.
Well, and the thing is one, like, there's a lot of stuff trying to pop off down there in Madison County. Like, I've had the privilege of working with your community corrections on some stuff and things like that. But the other thing is what I would like, a lot of people say that as a joke. Like, all I do is get high. But it also gives the chance for an ongoing private conversation about it, where you're not calling someone out. So what I would encourage you, if that's shared in the future, speak with someone privately around that and just be like, hey, I know you were joking, but if that, and this is where those community partners come in,
Mhm.
is if that's something you'd like to explore of looking for some more positive hobbies, we got somebody we can connect you with, and then just leave it at that.
And let it be.
But it plants that little seed for someone.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we're called off.
All right, we're done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.